So I'm absolutely delighted that Kersten England, the Chief Executive of Bradford Council and Chair of Yorkshire and Humber Councils, has agreed to join us today. And Kirsten's going to say a few words about the role of local authorities in this partnership. Thank you, Kersten.
Thanks, Peter. I just want to start almost following on from Karen to say I'm absolutely delighted we're here launching this network, or even community as I like to think of it, through Y-PERN. I do chair the Yorkshire and Humber Chief Executives Group, and over the last 3 years we've been working ever more closely with Vice-Chancellors right across the region, and Karen now chairs that group. And I think we are the only region with a concordat signed between us. And I do believe the higher education asset base of our region is a unique strength of this place, and it's our duty actually to ensure that that asset is put to full use to benefit the people of Yorkshire and Humber and the prosperity of people. Just a little bit about me. Through my career, I have absolutely, my work has benefited hugely through active continuous engagement with academics and researchers and applied research, and just a couple of examples of the kind of ways in which it has really shaped the work that I've done. So I am Chief Executive of Bradford now. In the 90s and early 2000s, I was a director in Bradford during the time of the riots, and at that time, with the University of Bradford through its Peace Studies Department, which was the first in the world, we had something called a Programme for a Peaceful City, which was a monthly gathering, interdisciplinary gathering, cross-university, and I think that's the other thing that I'm really keen on is interdisciplinarianism actually across the higher education institutions, but with practitioners right across all of the public sector. Thanks, Peter, if you're going to get me some water. Within the place, as we sought to rebuild community relations, manage community tensions and conflict. We did amazing things around, you know, truth and reconciliation processes, mediation processes, all guided, supported, and evaluated by the university. When I was Chief Executive in York for 6 years, a place I think of hugely fondly, and I know Karen is now a Vice-Chancellor there. I led the work on the Fairness Commission for York at that time, which John Sentemu sponsored, but we were enormously guided and shaped in our work by the work of Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson, and the Spirit Level, which is groundbreaking work really on income inequity, and starting to look at that in a local scale, in a place, really drove some of the early thinking for us around the real living wage, anchor institutions, as Karen has said, and so on. And when I think about, and just to come to the role of the Combined Authority, where for 12 years, I think I was the lead chief executive for innovation and economic growth, and we worked together a lot, didn't we, Liz, during that time, who we're going to hear from in a bit. Actually, how important it was to have, you know, Buckley 3M and Liz at the table, and Sue's here, and also the people from Nexus, and also to engage with places like the management school at Bradford, looking at how do you accelerate high growth, how do we support innovation, how do we support going up the value chain and manufacturing engineering, how do we embrace the circular economy. None of those things would have been as well shaped, understood and progressed if we hadn't had that interplay between academics, policymakers, people making investment decisions. And I think that's what this gives us a unique opportunity to do, is to get an engaged community of academics, public, private, voluntary community sector, think tanks, so I think some of those are here, trade unions, and can I also say, and I think it's really important, is also our communities. Too Little policy is shaped by our communities. I should declare I'm also, one of my other roles is I chair the Young Foundation. I'm really glad to see Emily is speaking later today, and one of the other trustees is in the room. That's Kate over there, who's going to join me on a panel in a bit. But I absolutely think creating that good community of all of those people with mutual respect, yet collaborating on shared problems and understood problems, hugely important and never more needed. Of course, this investment is about building the infrastructure for us to come together. It doesn't provide all the money we would wish for the research. I just want to mention a couple of other things though that could be helpful, and we are in the middle of bidding, are we not, for the local policy innovation partnership programme, which will actually potentially bring some money to actually fund particular areas of work that we wish to see tackled, which are relevant to our region and to some of the issues that Karen's already brought to life. But I would also mention that 2 local authorities in this region right now have received investments of £5 million, Bradford and Doncaster, to create the research infrastructure within their local authorities to become research active organisations. And that's through the Health Determinants Research Collaboration. And that work really needs to connect powerfully into the Y-PERN work and the LPIPs, all these acronyms, sorry about this. But I suppose what I'm signalling is this is a moment where we can take that next step on becoming research active together and building capacity within our organisations to do research, drawing on all of the expertise of the academy, really, and getting that right relationship going. So I do think it's a good moment, and it's never more needed because we face very challenging times. So the leaders of Yorkshire that I support and work with, the leaders of West Yorkshire that I work with and support are hugely supportive of this. It's fair to say in times of austerity and ongoing cuts to council budgets, it's very difficult to make the case at times for investment in this area. So this is crucial, really, that we can demonstrate the apparent efficacy of research allied to policy development, in guiding investment decisions and providing sound, robust evaluation. I also think for national government, they're hugely focused now on efficacy to drive investment decisions, but also the holy grail for me is proving the investment in prevention works, because we cannot afford the spending profile of our places right now. We are investing in treatment at the acute end of issues. We are not investing sufficiently in the prevention end. And if it's the biggest thing I could ask is that we can build robust evidence cases for that, getting upstream in terms of tackling some of the big issues that we face. Now, I was down actually to talk about cost of living, to set up, which is fine, because I'm doing the sort of bridge to the two, to talk about cost of living as a kind of the scale of the issue that we face. And then we're going to, I think, have a panel where we're going to talk more about what we're currently doing about it and how actually might we work more effectively together, because, and I've said this to my internal team, frankly, we're doing everything we can possibly think of right now, but we could be busy fools. And I suspect it's not touching the science, yeah? So that's sobering for me, really, that we really need to ally powerfully around this agenda if we're actually going to be there for our communities, some of whom are facing extraordinary and difficult times. So I'm going to move on and just talk briefly about the cost of living challenges that this region is facing, and I'll speak a little bit about what my locality is facing, and then we'll move into the panel discussion. And let's just capture the scale of Yorkshire. 5.5 million residents. Though it grieves me to say, I'm a proud Yorkshire woman now, so it is bigger than Scotland, or about the same scale as Scotland, can we just say. And I suppose therein lies the devolution case as well, doesn't it? But 5.5 million residents, 229,000 businesses. Scale is huge. And, our role in the public sector is to carry people through this issue. Our statutory duty is called the duty of care and well-being, which kind of is shorthand for doing everything it takes to create prosperity and well-being for the people and place now and for the future. If you see what I mean, that's actually my job, not steady state delivery of public services, but to do everything it takes to create a great quality of life here that isn't at the expense of the future. I just want to say, though, of course, it's called cost of living crisis, but we have to see it through the lens of everything we've been through since 2010. So it's a slightly kind of, I don't mean sloppy characterisation, but it's multiple crises and issues, and we need to understand the intersection of each of those and how they're playing out for different communities. So I won't dwell on 10 years of austerity, but suppressed wage growth and stagnant benefits, really, for the last 10 years, compounded now by real terms decline in settlements that we're seeing. I'll say a bit more of that. Whatever side of the argument you're on, the turbulence of Brexit, disruption of markets, scarcity of labour, positioning of ourselves in the global marketplace, International relations, could go on and on. Pandemic, don't need to say anything more about that other than the long tail of that pandemic in terms of the chronic ill health of many, disproportionately in lower income and Black and Asian minority ethnic communities. Yeah. And children that have lost learning and mental health issues, acuity mental health, all of those things we are seeing. Geopolitical insecurity, I'm sure many of you are involved with supporting Ukrainians arriving in your places, but the multiple impacts of the situation in Ukraine, the kind of, the insecurity now across the whole of Europe. Funnily enough, half of my family are Latvian and, well, Latvian Canadian, and, you know, they just thought that, well, they're extremely anxious now, having lived through as refugees the Second World War and looking at how emboldened he is in that part of Europe. Anyway, global and national environmental crises, it's here, it's in our region, it's not just happening in Pakistan, of course, it's happening dramatically, devastatingly in Pakistan, but is also right now the cost of environmental degradation and pollution, and it's compounded with the cost of living crisis when I look at how many people live in pre-1919 houses in the middle of Bradford, which are not insulated, they can't afford to heat, and their health is suffering, and their children going to school with empty lunchboxes. I just, you know, that, and that actually, you clock that back to the kind of not having made a just transition quickly enough on environmental issues. And then inflation and recession. Now, well, okay, so I don't mean, the one thing about me is I keep going, right? It's like, you know, we've got to keep going, haven't we? We've got to do everything. I mean, I suppose my point is always, we've got to do everything we possibly can about that which is within our influence. And sometimes we underperform on that. We don't do everything that we could do, which is within our sphere of influence. And I'm completely with, I think, Karen and Peter were saying, the region is a really important spatial dimension to work in powerfully. We have got very used in this country to the centralisation of the state and therefore constantly looking to Westminster. And that doesn't help us. As much as there is a problem when we need further devolution, we also need to maximise everything we can do at the spatial dimensions that we operate within. So I'm really pleased that we're doing this now. Okay, I'm just going to give you a little, have I got time? Where am I at? Oh, yeah, I've got time. A very little bit, and I'm sure you know this as well as I do, but just, and much of it, of course, has been multiply covered on media channels. But anyway, what's actually happening out there? You know, consumer prices. Now, we are seeing, aren't we, a slight fluctuation in the rate of inflation now, coming down slightly. I suppose what I'm focused on is the ongoing inflation around food, basics, essentials, which is eye-watering and scary, which I think is still around about 17%, isn't it? The cost of the food basket and the essentials, and the research that's been done about actually the inflation on the lower-priced goods, you know, is scary. And we're seeing that. We're absolutely seeing that anecdotally and evidentially through our schools, through the presentation at food banks and community shops and so on. But a bit of fluctuation, isn't there, on the overall basket? And I know wholesale prices have declined, so we should see that flow through. But I know in purchasing terms, not yet seeing it in terms of us buying energy and fuel domestically or as an organisation. We all know this, don't we? We got up this morning in my house and one of us had, me, forgotten to turn the heating down, having thought he'd turned it down. So it'd been at 19 degrees all night, and it was a disaster. It was almost like I said, it's like going to stay in a hotel, isn't it? 4-star hotel for a night. We've been asleep. Anyway, never mind. But that's, you know, look, I can afford the bill. Let me just be honest. And that's not a disaster as it is for others, right? So 65.5% increase in electricity, 128% for gas. And the help with energy costs. I do know prices need to drop in tandem with the withdrawal of the government subsidy. I have a member of my family who runs a brewery, and they're going to lose their energy support come April. I know he's looking at all his stats. I mean, this is the thing, the precarity that is coming into everybody's lives, businesses as well as households. I'm just rents, I mean, I suppose, you know, the house market is pretty stagnant. Private rents up. We've just put social rents up to the government cap of 7%. That's less than inflation. But actually, if you think about the tenants, that's still, you know, very, very challenging. That you know, our housing revenue account would not be viable if we didn't. We did it with a heavy heart. We will still be providing support, but those are the really challenging decisions that have to be made. And you know, and everybody will be getting, most people are getting, who are not on fixed rate, monthly updates on how much more mortgage payment they're paying. Talked about real term pay cuts. I did hear yesterday quoted, and I haven't verified this, a 23% reduction actually in the value of some public sector wages since 2010. A quarter, their wages worth 3/4 of what it was in real terms. And obviously we've seen, what is a conundrum, isn't it, is we, through the recession in a way, because inflation was flat, there wasn't such a pressure on wages, but now we have a tight labour market, and we have runaway inflation, and yet the wage settlements, doesn't seem to be playing through. And I know the mantra and, you know, and the evidence, if we want to get on top of inflation, maybe we have to ride this through. But you cannot ignore that, you know, pay fell in real terms by about 7.5% in the public sector. So let's come to households, public service and business. I'm just trying to get us focused into what we're doing about it when we get into the panel. OBR forecast, real household disposable income will fall by 4.3% in the financial year we're in, and then 3% next year. First real-time household disposable income has fallen for 2 consecutive years, fiscal years. It's against the mantra where people always thought that things get better, don't they? And 91% of adults, an increase in their cost of living, we know that. 97% food shopping, 91% in increased energy costs. Low-income households, as I've said. Lowest income households, 14% of their income on food, compared to 8% in the highest decile. That just demonstrates that. The JRF have published some fairly scary stuff recently, and it's really worth reading Paul Kissack's commentary on this, and all of his team, I would say. A survey of the bottom 40%. I heard him speak recently where they're saying that actually the overall numbers in poverty, but it's the precarity and closeness to destitution now is increasing dramatically. I mean, we still are one of the most affluent countries in the Western world. I just put that out there. But they found 60% had gone without at least one essential since 2022, not heating their home, size of meals, skipping meals, not buying basic toiletries. Adults with children, I think one of the things we need to understand in research terms is household makeup and the different impacts for different households. 56% of 35 to 44-year-olds with children less than £100 to spend in their bank account in a month. So they you know, couple with children and there's £100 in the bank in a month. It's pretty scary. Food Foundation, 9.7 million adults experiencing food insecurity, 20% of households. And if you're receiving universal credit, and let's remember 40% of people on universal credit, I think, are in work, the last time I looked. 54% experienced food insecurity, so 20%, 54%. 2/5 universal credit recipients more than one day in the previous month where they didn't eat at all. So, and I could go on. We talked about fuel poverty, transport costs. I mean, I don't know if anyone saw, and let's also understand the rural-urban dimension of this. I thought it was quite good, actually, the piece they did last night, which came from Hawes, which found the pub trying to stay open 2 days a week just to provide warm space, but not being able to stay open right through the winter. The young person who was 30 miles from Kendal College, you know, and the cost of transport. Debt borrowing and finance. I mean, Bradford has Provident Finance, which of course headquartered in Bradford because long history of low income and therefore lending to low income households. I've been talking to them about the profile of their customers and what they will do to support that customer base through this, but also they're seeing new customers coming towards them. who they've never seen or lent to. New Economics Foundation, 38% of families unable to afford essentials by April 24. And actually underlying all this, and why I think these issues are so intersected, really, and the programme acknowledges that, because we're going to talk about just transition, can't we, aren't we? And so on. The weakness in our economy is urgent now. I'm not always a huge fan of big, national strategies that drive everything, but we don't have any coherent framing right now, I would say, around the economy for this country, the nature of the economy, trying to build the transitions we need to make, the interventions we need to make. And we know we need urgently to get into markets where it's the investment costs are considerable. We've just seen the battery maker unable to get going, and that put the future of the motor industry in this country at risk. I'm not trying to depress everybody. I was asked to portray the scale of some of the challenges, I think. And many of you will know businesses are also, we are looking at kind of businesses that are, well, like the hospitality businesses, unable to trade in the way that they used to, some considering closing down, moving into other markets, and cut by that supply chain fragility, debt servicing, wage demands, and failing consumer demand. That's quite a set of challenges to try and work your way through. So, very, very quickly, I'm going to do playing out in Yorkshire and the Humber. Actually, I wonder, should I stop there? I think I've probably characterised it sufficiently, because I'm going to go on and give you a bit more about Yorkshire and the Humber. But actually, it's all playing out. And as we know, regionally, we don't perform as well as the regions of the south and east in terms of skills levels, economic activity, health of our population, and so on. And that's some of what we really need to work on and challenge. But actually, harnessing the power of the think tanks, harnessing the power of the academy, harnessing the power of the local authorities who are committed to this agenda, that's where I want to be, and why I'm delighted to be here this morning. Thank you very much.